So quickly, before we begin the video, I want to address those who are picking up the game and who are of the picking up portion of the title. So there's a lot of misinformation about the Final Fantasy XIV game and how buying it works and all that kinds of stuff, so I'm quickly going to tell you about it now. I'm going to mention a couple of titles in this, which are all in relation to Final Fantasy XIV. A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, Stormblood, and Shadowbringers. To just quickly give you a perspective, here's a quick chart to basically encapsulate it. The demo gets you to a level 30, the base game gets you to level 50, and if you buy the latest expansion, all previous expansions come with it. So you don't need to buy Heavensward and Stormblood separately, you just need to get Shadowbringers. There is a subscription to this, but it's either 11 or 14 bucks. And personally, I would go with the 11 buck option because it allows you to make one character on a single server. But on Final Fantasy XIV, you can take every class on one character and switch as you want. And you can also visit any server in your data center, so there's not a whole lot of restriction to it. That's it, so enjoy the rest of the video. In this day and age, when you think of the titans of the MMO genre, you think of games like World of Warcraft, RuneScape, Guild Wars 2, EVE Online, and Final Fantasy XIV. Me and my friends at the time looked through several of these options, and I already tried Final Fantasy XIV's demo on my crappy old computer back in the start of 2015. It was hardly a memorable experience, but that's mostly because my computer's performance was so lackluster, it played at like 5 frames per second. But I did enjoy the gameplay. I insisted we stick to the Final Fantasy franchise when we were trying out MMOs, and we got the starter editions cheaply for each of us. It still ran like crap on my system that I just then had gotten, but I opted to buy it for the PS3 instead at the time, and still played with my friends. 5 years since picking it up, I'm the only one left of our little group, and I've been playing since A Realm Reborn. I wasn't part of the big down of the game, but I've seen its biggest ups. Now, as I'm writing this in March 2020, I'm here to help you answer the question, is Final Fantasy XIV worth picking up and playing in 2020? I'll go by the categories of story, graphics, sound, gameplay, and summarization at the end. But if you're looking for a quick and short answer, yes, it is worth picking up and playing. Whether you're a minimalist casual or a hardcore raider, in the mighty words of IGN, it's got a little something for everyone. If you're part of the group picking up Final Fantasy XIV for the first time and you're just trying to get to your high-level friends, you're set for an awesome time, but also a lengthy time, to be honest, considering you have A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, Stormblood, and Shadowbringers to play through just for the main story alone. But just like your friend probably suggested, or like I'm suggesting it now, please take your time. Final Fantasy XIV is a Japanese MMORPG with an emphasis on the RPG part. What that means, if you've played any other JRPG, you'll realize that the story is incredibly important and one of its main focus points, and this MMO is no different. A Realm Reborn is a little bit dull and predictable, Heavensward is incredible, Stormblood gets a little stale at the start but improves towards the end, and Shadowbringers, well, it was the number 2 PC game of 2019 and the number 1 PS4 game of 2019 as well. It was that good, and it only ended up 2 points behind Red Dead Redemption 2 on the PC. And this was an expansion, not a standalone game. But that's a common misconception with Final Fantasy XIV. Upon the release of a new expansion, the expansion themselves often have so much content and story they might as well just be considered standalone games, or rather sequels to each other that you can carry over the save from. Knowing all of this now, Final Fantasy XIV seems a bit daunting to pick up. But don't worry, this MMO is great with every step of the way, and some of its beloved and less beloved characters are still fantastic. The story, characters, and areas cover a wide range, war-torn areas to snowy Victorian-like settings, and the people reflect those areas. You'll find yourself mainly accompanied by the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, a lovely little bunch, and you're going to either love them or hate them. Each member brings its own little thing to the group, even those who primarily sit on the sidelines. In side quests, for example, there is the hilarious story of Hildebrand and his adventures. You've probably seen gifs of the story already somewhere on the internet. Stories about harmless serpents being worshipped like gods, Mughals building a new home, preventing catfish extinction by making a festival. From serious to silly, the game offers it all. Graphically, the footage is what you get. There's a noticeable increase in graphic density, quality, and especially cutscene quality as you continue to play. Over the years, Final Fantasy XIV has had to run on a PS3, 32-bit systems, and over time upgraded itself to run only on PS4s and 64 PC systems, and also Macs by the way. Shadowbringers is the first expansion to run on these merits alone, and it shows. That's not to say any of the designs were ugly in A Realm Reborn, not at all. It just feels flatter in comparison to later on as the game further opens up and it further progresses. The gear has some neat designs, although earlier on they are kind of questionable. Some of the leveling gear, you're just going to be scratching your head. But other than that, when you compare it to later on, and you can make some really cool gear sets, it's really worth the grind for it if you're just part of looking cool. There is a definite side of the community that is all about glamoring, which in other MMOs I believe you call it transmogging or something like that. There are several races in the game that each look pretty cool, and I will allow a little bit of customization. Some of the options are a little meh, and most people do end up looking a little bit similar. But your character is your character. We have Hures, a human race, Mikote, the feline humanoid race, Elazin, the elven race, Rogadin, the big burly race for both women and men, Lalafell, the dwarves of Eorzea that kind of look cute, but also have some of the and they end up being the source of a lot of bad things in Eorzea, turns out. The Aura, the dragon-like race of Eorzea, and finally the race of Shadowbringers introduced, the female Viera from Final Fantasy XII in the Ivalice universe, and the Hrothgar, known to many as the Ronso from the Final Fantasy X franchise, though they look little like them to be honest. Final Fantasy XIV might not have all the visual effects that games like Black Desert, for example, have with high amounts of bloom or super high customization options, but like I said, what you see is what you get. In my opinion, it looks good, raw but good. Actually, I originally wanted to move on to gameplay from here, but I gotta make a notation for sound here. Specifically, the Final Fantasy XIV soundtrack has an astounding amount of soundtracks and an incredible amount of quality to them. When it was just a few patches into the Heavensward expansion, Final Fantasy XIV got the world record of most songs played in a video game, or including expansions actually, at 384 songs. This was about 2.5 expansions ago. A Realm Reborn soundtrack plays it safe with the classic Final Fantasy stylish orchestrals and stuff like that, sometimes there being a remake or a remake of the very first iteration of Final Fantasy XIV, a big collaboration with composers from previous games or just previous titles, or like Battle on the Big Bridge returns, and just a lot of remakes, remixes and stuff like that. You'll definitely feel like you'll know some of the tracks that appear in the game. Masayoshi Soken is an incredible composer and shows his incredible skill predominantly in themes for like trials and dungeons. Again, Shadowbringers here too is Soken's high point in the series. So far, with each of the tracks having so much personality, it's insane. I find myself listening to a lot of the tracks from Shadowbringers quite often, to be honest. And lots of remixes of original songs that were originally in the game now get remixed again, even if you can sometimes miss it. If that's not enough, Final Fantasy XIV has its own rock band, featuring members of the team such as Koji Fox from the translation team and Soken himself. Remixes, rock, EDM, ballads, jazz, to music you'd hear in a fighting game or a Yakuza game, Final Fantasy XIV has it all. I gotta make a big point about the music here. It is so good. Voice acting is done really well, all of the characters are done really well, some of the class sound effects are really, really nice and really telegraphed, if that makes sense. Like in the middle of combat, you'll hear a sound effect and you'll immediately recognize, oh, okay, that's when I gotta do this on this job. They are good indicators, the soundtrack is wonderful. Honestly, sound, this game is a definite 9 to 10 out of 10 just on sound alone. When I say that Final Fantasy XIV offers a little something for everyone, I do mean everyone. In terms of combat, you'll spend a very little time fighting in the overworld actually. Rather, you'll spend a lot of time in instanced content like dungeons, the main bulk of the game, trials, single bosses, usually from the story, that usually end up being a single fight, sometimes with multiple phases, and they usually drop like vanity items like minions or mounts. Raids for those who wish to be mechanically, challenged and stuff like that. Savage raids and extreme trials for those that further boost the difficulty of respective content, and 24-man raids that are somewhat less challenging, but experiences for big groups. Finally, there are ultimates that actually appease to the highest end raiders of the game. Let's talk quickly about what's designed for the three player types, if you will. For the casual players, you don't need to play more than the dungeons and the trials. If you're not raiding and you would rather chill out with some crafting or gathering, Final Fantasy XIV has you covered. Even somewhat competitively with Shadowbringers' Restoration project and stuff like that. I won't talk about it too much, but essentially you're racing for contribution points against people in your own server and get rewards for doing it. And truly, crafters and gatherers are the true elite of the game, and they end up making the most glamorous outfits. They usually end up crafting endgame gear that a lot of the world's first raiders end up using, so they're the moneymakers of Eorzea. There's even a ton of minigames into this game. Honestly, it feels like one giant fun fair. A card collecting game in Triple Triad that you might recognize from previous Final Fantasy titles, a sort of RTS game, a chocobo racing minigame, so much to do. Of course, this is for everyone. For the mid-core members, you'll likely dive into things like extreme trials. Their difficulty sits between the raids and the savage raids. You'll end up farming for weapons, mounts, and minions, and you'll likely poke your head in a savage raid or two to see what's up. For the hardcore raiders, they're savage raids and you want to min-max your class, dealing high numbers of damage, and heal or mitigate as much as you can, and see what difficulties the game can offer you. And if that's not good enough and still too easy, challenge yourself and 7 other friends in Ultimates, the highest difficulty the game has to offer. You'll study the fight and learn 20 minutes worth of straight mechanics, while still performing your job optimally. I have never touched Ultimates. I never wish to. I do not want to break myself mentally with stuff like that. And after clearing it, you'll probably stand a Limsa Lominsa idly with your shiny new weapon. You might not get that joke, but those who do know what I'm talking about, you'll get that joke. The best part is once you reach the overall gear levels to enter raid content, you can do it no matter what type of player you are. Just remember how to play your class and pay attention to the raid. There's a ton of guides online when it comes to helping you clear stuff, explaining mechanics and stuff like that. Hardcore raiders might even want to craft and gather stuff themselves to be self-sufficient in the end. But as I said, there's a little something for everyone in this game. In summarization, Final Fantasy XIV is still fun and it's always been fun. And whether or not you're a role-playing casual or a hardcore player, sleepless endgame, ultimate raider, whatever, you'll find something to do at the end of the day. I know people that never run out of things to do in Final, despite playing 8 hours a day. There is, of course, patch downtime where content just kind of gets repetitive because you usually end up, running the same stuff. We had that from a stretch from, I believe, November over to a bit of February. And that's mostly because the new year happened. A lot of stuff happened in between that. So I can kind of excuse it, but it did get a little bit dull. The game developers do encourage you to start playing some other games during these dull periods so you don't burn out on the game hard. And in the end, what brings us all together is the community. Yes, Final Fantasy XIV's community has bad apples like many other communities of this size inevitably end up having, but we're all enjoying the same game. I know it gets harped on quite a lot that this game has a great community, to the point where there is a meme of great community, by the way, but the community genuinely is one of the more friendlier, creative ones from what I've seen. It has its quirks, of course, but as I said, it has, just like any other big community, its quirks as it should have. If it was all fine, what would we be hiding? You know what I mean? We're all enjoying the same game at the end. The development team even hosts its own convention called FanFest. While it does have booths at conventions, its main community attraction are the FanFests held in different continents. From Asia, Europe, North America, they all get their own FanFest. Even though the next European one might be a little bit debatable since it's in London in 2021, so they didn't entirely plan that right. There are many communities within Final Fantasy XIV as well. The guilds of the game, as we call them, are called free companies, and those end up becoming communities of their own most of the time. And if you speak French, English, German, or Japanese, exclusively those languages, You'll have a place in the community as well, as the game supports directly translating languages and words and stuff like that in game with the system. It's called the auto-translate system. It'll have like these two little brackets, and you know, what I see in my language will be translated over to yours, so you know what I'm talking about. You don't need to communicate much, but what is essential for communication, you can get across. Even better is if you don't play it on PC, or if you don't want to play with a keyboard and mouse, no problem. Controllers are supported, and the PS4 is also fully supported still. I believe there's even rumors of an Xbox One release, but the last time the development team talked about that kind of thing, they actually got slapped on the wrist, so the details are still a little bit hazy about that as we speak. From casuals to raiders, from lorehounds to simple story followers, in the mighty words of IGN, it's got a little something for everyone. And this is why you should get Final Fantasy XIV. If you like this video, please show me some support and give me a like or even subscribe. I make guides and sometimes a few comedic videos, sometimes on Final Fantasy XIV. I said sometimes twice there. I'm trying to go a little bit variety based, as well as uploading some music here and there, but hey, you'll find some Final Fantasy XIV resources here. If you'll end up signing up, I do wish you the best of luck. Personally, I'm on Cerberus, and if you would like to join, my name is Fabled Ways on there. Send me a whisper, look for me somewhere. Maybe you'll even want to join my free company. Voltic Knights is an awesome free company. Shout out to the lads, they are wonderful. In any case, whether you pick it up or not, thank you for watching. My name is Fabled Ways, and I hope to see you again very, very soon.